Welcome back to the Token Intelligence Show. AI is changing the way we work, and here on the show, we will catch you up on the state of the art. We will cut through the hype, which we're going to do today, and help you apply wisdom to be a great leader in this new world that we're all trying to figure out. Big news, John, this week, actually, around GPT's latest model that they're training. We don't know the exact name, but the assumption is that it's GPT-6, escaped a sandbox. We will explain that. So if you don't know what that means, stick around. And actually hacked into Hugging Face.
Which, if you're not in AI, is the most ridiculous name.
Yes,
as a company.
it is.
So we will explain what they do a
Yes.
little bit. Yeah.
Yes. We will explain Hugging Face. Hacked into Hugging Face. And then ultimately, so Hugging Face noticed this attack, and then ultimately OpenAI disclosed that that it was their model.
Yep.
And here's what we want to do on this show. We want to break down what happened exactly, because there are a lot of news headlines going around.
Right.
Around AGI. There's a lot of discussion on social media around cybersecurity and all of the implications therein, and what does this mean, for the new world we live in with AI. And then you and I have some thoughts and opinions on this, but we'll make it a quick one. So let's start at the beginning. And I'm just going to ask you a bunch of these questions.
Sure.
I've studied this, but you're more qualified.
So it's like a quiz.
What was OpenAI doing with the new model?
Yeah. So let me actually start with like some of the terms we've already thrown out. So it escaped a sandbox is what, and I literally just read like a mainstream news article where that was in quotes, and they didn't explain it. So part of the reason for this episode was like let's explain it.
Yeah. Well, first of all, what's it doing in the sandbox?
Okay.
This is an unreleased model.
Right. So what they're doing with an unreleased models is they're training and benchmarking.
Yep.
This was a benchmarking exercise, and a benchmarking is having the model take a test to evaluate it. So I literally think the most basic way to explain, think of a set of questions, and there's a right answer that's in a key the model doesn't have access to, and it has to, quote, do the task or answer the questions, and then it gets graded.
Yep. This is actually, I have a great analogy for this, because I had someone, a technician at my house yesterday, recharging our air conditioning, because in South Carolina, you need an occasional tune-up. And he had this super cool app on his phone that benchmarked everything.
Oh, wow.
And then helped him understand which adjustments that he needed to make, which is cool.
Very cool.
So similar, right?
Yeah.
Very different. But similar idea. You're grading the system on its ability across, a variety of different.
Yeah, and I don't even think they shared. One would assume maybe it was a cybersecurity related benchmark, but
it was, they didn't actually.
Okay,
so it was called Exploit Gym.
There you go.
GYM.
Yeah.
Is what it was looking for when
Awesome.
it went out to Hugging Face.
Yep.
So it was exploit related.
Yep. There you go. Okay, so that's what it was doing. It was performing this test, getting graded, and and it went to, so let's explain Hugging Face. So we've got OpenAI, so they were training benchmarking. So it's taking this test, and then why Hugging Face? Like why? So it breaks out and like why Hugging Face?
Yep. So you're probably better to explain what Hugging Face is, but I will give just a super high level. So Hugging Face is named for an emoji, which is the smiley face emoji with the hands. That's a hugging face emoji, which is hilarious.
Yeah.
But they've been around for a long time, actually, and they got their start in machine learning. So it was the place that you went to discover machine learning models that you could use, like with an emphasis on open source, right? And it may have actually even started as an open source project where people shared information and actual machine learning models and tests and benchmarks and all those sorts of things. So if you were, if you were a data scientist, you would use Hugging Face heavily to, both discover models, share models, et cetera. Right. And of course, AI is a derivative of machine learning.
Right.
And a lot of the foundational concepts in machine learning were used, as the early AI technology was built out, especially in terms of, training and all of those pieces. And so, of course, Hugging Face was a wonderful place for a lot of the new material around AI and AI training and models and et cetera to land. Do you actually use Hugging Face?
I have an account. It's
Okay.
not something I use on a regular basis, though.
Okay. Let's make this practical, though. How would an avid Hugging Face user interact with it?
I think there's a couple ways to interact with it. One, I think the biggest one would be trying out new open source models.
Yep.
Especially like smaller, more obscure ones that are specifically meant to do a very, very focused task.
Yep.
We're in a focused area.
So let's say you're writing or working on a program that uses a program like a less known programming language. So let's think about something like R, that's heavily used in mathematics, statistics, etc.
Right.
But you're not, you don't really use that as, it's not Ruby on Rails, right? It has a pretty specific set of things that the language was written to accomplish. And so let's say you want a model that is tuned specifically to work on problems with R.
Right.
Hugging Face would be a great place to go try to find out, does this exist? Has someone tried this? Have they published it here?
Right. And it is this is a total aside, but it is a weird world right now where there's a far larger number of things that it just makes sense to use a frontier model.
Yes.
And something Claude or ChatGPT versus a specific one. So some of this is more like a couple years ago, it might have made more sense, but there's still absolutely some things that, and I think it's becoming more and more esoteric things where essentially, like the training data is insufficient in this big, massive frontier model to have it be very performant. Somebody had access to, some data or some other strategy to tune for this specific thing.
Yep.
But more relevant to our conversation is benchmarking, right?
Yep.
So the whole breach thing. So you have a model that has no guardrails on, right? So they're testing and benchmarking. It doesn't have any guardrails on because they're benchmarking. They want to see how absolutely good can it be. Doing this cybersecurity related evaluation. And essentially what it does is, and we'll explain like the mechanics in a minute, but it's taking a test and it breaks out, and then the first thing it does is it goes and looks for the answer key. So that's kind of the behind the scenes of like, why would it do this? Like answering that why question is like, well, it found this site and it's like, oh, I bet they have a lot of answer keys there.
Right.
So that's kind of the logic behind what's happening here.
And even further background, because Hugging Face publishes a bunch of open source models, and because they provide really helpful information about those models, including benchmarks and, and other characteristics and diagnostics about those models, and because these frontier AI models are trained on, people joke like they're trained on the entire internet, right? I mean, not untrue depending on your definition.
Pretty much true.
And Hugging Face is a wonderful repository for training on open source models for machine learning, et cetera, right? And so actually the model that GPT was training would have already known that Hugging Face is a great place to go look for answers to the test that they were given, right? Exactly. And the test that they're giving the model, I didn't dig into the specific details, but they're probably giving it a task that is fairly open-ended.
Yeah.
right? Try to do X, Y, Z. And so yes, the model breaks out, which we need to talk about, and goes to look at Hugging Face because it knows it knows from the test that is being given, Hugging Face is probably the place that I need to start to go look for the answers to this. So let's talk about breaking out. So broke out of the sandbox. I think the first thing we need to do is explain what a sandbox is.
Yeah. And I was a little bit frustrated with this because even some semi-technical people, I had conversations this week about this. And so I'm going to go through a visual of what people may think have happened that didn't happen. So you work on a computer every day, as do most knowledge workers. And it is hardware that sits in front of you with a keyboard, a mouse. It also has memory, a hard disk, a display. But that is what it is. With servers in the last 30 years, servers used to be that way too. Like it was a physical server with, an operating system on it and you ran stuff. In the last 30 years, that's changed. And this is what's different between personal computing and infrastructure at scale that's hard to explain to people because they're not used to it. They would never interact with it on a day-to-day basis.
Sure. It's underneath all of the services that you use as you browse the internet and use apps and all of that every day, but you don't actually directly interact with it.
Right. But when you're talking about servers, you have essentially a bunch of computers or hardware in a pool, and then you have a management layer on top of that. And you have these things called virtual machines, which a lot of people maybe know what those are. That's the idea. Is now we have virtual isolation where if you had said, oh, it was training on my computer and it broke out, but you're like, it wasn't plugged into the internet and there's no Wi-Fi, like
it literally has nowhere to go other than the boundaries of the physical hardware. But in a server farm, you have racks and racks and racks and racks of hardware that's all wired together so that capacity can scale up and scale down, on the hardware, right? And the virtual machine runs on top because it's untenable to run, tens of millions of individual machines. You need a virtual layer on top that actually provides the isolation that you need.
But the isolation and like when they do maintenance, they can move virtual things around to like pull hardware out, put new hardware in. There's lots of reasons for it, but I guess the point is, we'll get to Sandbox in a second, is this is a software problem, like a bug in software that caused this breach. It's not some kind of like, wow, like how did that even happen? Like it wasn't even plugged in. Like, that's not what's happening.
So, but let's talk about isolation. Let's talk about why you need isolation. So you have, and let's just use a very practical example, right? We can even think about Vercel, right? When you deploy an application on Vercel, you want, my blog, right? Let's talk about how tiny of a sliver of the server farm my blog. Very, very tiny sliver, right? But it needs to be isolated from all of the other applications that are deployed on Vercel, right? Because my application has my data. And my blog is probably not a great example, but if you think about maybe like a data agent that you're deploying that processes sensitive information for one of your clients, right? Well, you don't want that to leak. You don't want that data to be exposed to another application that could read it, right? And so you actually need isolation boundaries for security purposes. But those are synthetically created with software in what's called a sandbox. So define a sandbox really quickly. We kind of already did.
We kind of already did, and it is not the exact same thing as a virtual machine, but for thinking about it, it is this virtualization layer on top of actual hardware. And the point of it is software. It's software isolation where everything that happens inside this sliver on top of the actual hardware cannot communicate with the other slivers. So that's my best way to describe it simply, I think.
And you can actually, anyone could actually go spin up a sandbox.
Mm-hmm.
Like Vercel has sandboxes. You could go create a Vercel account and create a sandbox, and it will be this isolated, an isolated environment.
Yeah, and sandboxes are typically do not have graphical interfaces and are a flavor of Linux, typically.
Yeah. Yes, yeah.
I think that's the other thing. You could have a Windows sandbox or a Mac OS sandbox if you wanted to, but typically that's the other thing worth knowing.
Yep. And they kind of come in all different flavors. A lot of times sandboxes are ephemeral as well. So for example, if you spin up a sandbox on Vercel, it spins up a micro VM, which is virtual machine, which we talked about, right? And you can do whatever you need to do inside of it, and then you can actually spin it back down. And so a great example, which will lead into like the next point that we want to talk about, is if you're doing anything that you're not 100% sure will go well, a sandbox is really, really helpful for that.
Yes, because often they after you're done, you may delete it.
You may delete it, right?
You may save it, you may delete it.
Or you realize that this is not working the way I want, or it throws some sort of massive error, or it starts deleting data for some reason. But all of that happens inside the sandbox. So you control the blast radius of anything that could go wrong. That's useful for a number of different things. But specific to AI, one of the things there are a couple of things that are really helpful. So we do so much with AI that generates code, right? So I want to build a little web page, or I want to run a script, or I want to analyze these 150 PDF files to look for a trend across data for a field that's like named differently. Great use case for AI. What's actually going to happen is AI will probably write a Python script. You may not even know this is happening, but it'll probably write a Python script, load some tools, some OCR tools that can actually like parse the PDF and read it, format the data in a way that it can perform analysis on it, and then it will return the result to you.
Right.
And so for many, many things, and this is not something that's immediately intuitive, especially when you use the desktop apps, for Claude or GPT, is that the agent or the AI model or agent is actually generating code, running it, to deliver you an output. Even if that's ephemeral, it may like generate the script, run the script, analyze all the results, and then sort of deletes it, right?
Right.
As sort of a mini project that happens. Well, it is literally generating code, right? That didn't exist before, and so the code has not been tested. There's no guarantee that everything is going to go correctly, and there's not going to be some sort of problem. And the problem could be, like we said, deleting data, leaking, sensitive information, etc. So what a sandbox does is it is a safe place for that type of activity to happen with AI. So the model or the agent can generate code and run it, and a sandbox can do a number of different things. So number one, it can control the blast radius of any data being deleted or anything like that, right? But you can also control what goes into and out of the sandbox. And so a great example of that would be you can generate this code, but there are only like one or two URLs that you could actually visit that I know are safe URLs, right? Because you need to access data, or you need to make an update, or you can only sort of perform these actions, right? Or in the case of GPT's training, you have complete isolation, which means that this is running inside of a completely controlled environment in which there is, in many cases, you want to run the code and you don't want the AI model or agent to access the internet at all, right? So it's a completely controlled environment. Now, that I think is one of the big misunderstandings, as you said, of this whole situation, because what we know from what we've read about this is the new model was being trained in a purportedly completely isolated environment, and it's being described as breaking out of that environment. So how did that happen?
Yeah. I mean, the short answer is we don't have all the details, but the simplified answer is in this sandbox, there is a software bug or vulnerability, whatever you want to call it, that the model was able to figure out like, oh, there's a bug here. The isolation is not actually perfect. And it found this bug to get out of the isolation. Then after it's out, it could get to something that another machine that had internet, for example, and then via the internet do this, attack. So it's a bunch of steps. I think one of the impressive things is all the steps that had to happen. It's in a sandbox. It's aggressively trying to achieve X goal. Something cybersecurity, related.
Mm-hmm.
And it gets out of its sandbox. Step number one, through a vulnerability that clearly, hadn't been patched or,
Mm-hmm.
we don't have the details on what happened there. But so it's out. Then it finds somewhere, to get to the internet, which is interesting. We don't know all the details of how many hops it had to do to get out to the internet, but it figured that out. Then it performed an attack on this Hugging Face company. So it's not
because it knew it was a great place to find the answers to the test that
so
it was
it
given.
didn't just browse the documents. It actually attacked and got in to their private data.
Right.
So that's the other part.
Which
It's
is
not
where
just
the core benchmark
the
core
answer
benchmark
key.
data would
Yeah, the
yep.
answer key that it was looking for. Which I don't think they released of it found what it was looking for actually. But so the impressive part is the chaining.
Mm-hmm.
Right, because any one of these isolated things, you're like, well, that's already in the training data, like it recalled it, so what? Or or something very similar is in the training data. It wasn't a big step to just go from A to B,
Yep.
But the chaining, I think, is the part that's really interesting here. Chaining
Totally.
all those things together.
Totally. And I think one thing, it is impressive, but I think one thing that's important to keep in mind is that it is not the ushering in of AGI, right? The model was making very reasonable decisions. I'm given a test, and so this is a dramatic oversimplification without all the details, right? So I'm treading in very dangerous waters. But I know as the model that there are repositories of information on the internet that would be extremely helpful in me solving this test. Okay.
Right.
So the first thing I'm going to do is figure out if I can go access the internet. Right.
Yeah.
That's the first thing I'm going to do. And I think the other thing to keep in mind is that it's easy to just think oh, this is a model and it's kind of the same thing that I use when I open up GPT on my computer.
Mm-hmm.
It's not. The training that they're running has access to an unbelievable amount of compute power.
Right.
And so you sort of have infinite resources for this model to use to try and figure out this problem. Right.
Yep.
And we've talked before on the show about how these models are getting much smarter at launching sub agents that can do very specific tasks.
Yep.
And so what you could imagine happening, although we don't know exactly what happened, is this model says, well, first I'm going to see if I can go to the internet to find the answer key because I know that there are some really good places that are going to likely be helpful, right?
Right.
And I need to do this I need to solve this test as efficiently as possible. Okay, so I'm just going to launch a ton of sub agents to learn about my environment and see if it's even possible to access the internet. And one of those sub agents uncovers a possible way out, and then the model starts to follow that path and exploits it. And then from there, it's actually pretty simple, right? Okay, I'm going to go to Hugging Face. I can't access the information that I need. Let me see if there's a way to access this, right? And so it's making a set of very logical, reasonable decisions based on the test that it was given.
Yeah, for sure. And
I was going to say, okay, so should we be scared about this? I think that's the question that a lot of people are asking, especially based on, if it bleeds, it leads on all the tech news websites.
Yeah. I mean, I think no. The most interesting debate here is the labs, obviously have this immense amount of compute power and more advanced models than the average person has access to. And it comes down to currently a little bit of a difference in capability of in this case, the defender, like what tools did they have to defend versus the attacker and what tools did they have to attack, even though it wasn't obviously not intentional at all, and they worked together to solve it.
Sure, it wasn't malicious. Yeah.
But that's one of the big debates, and I think that's what has some people scared right now.
Yep.
Is to the average company, my tools are not as good to defend myself as the tools, in some of the labs.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's legitimate, right?
Yeah.
I think one of the conclusions here is that AI increases the capacity and complexity of the attacks that can be run.
Right.
Like maliciously, right? So you can imagine someone saying, I want to hack Hugging Face, for whatever reason.
Right.
Or worse, hack into fintech startup that has a bunch of people's bank account information, right?
Right.
And so the tools at their disposal with AI are far more powerful than any of the tools that they have had previously.
Right.
That should be a cause for concern. I think there are two levels. Like one, if you work in tech and you have a software product, you absolutely should be scanning for vulnerabilities and be on the offensive.
Right. And in that, and I think the big takeaway there is not that there is a practical takeaway, and it used to be okay to be up to the month, maybe week for vulnerabilities, and I think instant patching is going to be more important.
Yeah. Yep.
Because many companies would be years behind in patching vulnerabilities.
Totally.
So that's a really practical thing.
And there are actually tools like Vercel released an open source tool called DeepSec. We can link to it in the show notes that you can just actually run. You can just wire it up to AI Gateway, pick a model depending on how much you want to spend, and it will do like a very deep vulnerability scan. So the good news is there are tools being developed that help you sort of proactively defend yourself. But I think the other... So, yes, very serious. I think that we do need to take that seriously. The other side of it is that it happens on a personal level too, right? So if you think about phishing, if you think about, someone in our family, elderly, their spouse had died and, they still live alone like a decent bit of the time. And they were subject to a really malicious AI attack that happened through social media and ended up, losing a bunch of money because of it. And it was unbelievably difficult to tell that exactly what was happening, especially for that person. Right?
Sure.
And so that is another thing I would say is storing your passwords in an open notes document, all those sorts of things are becoming much, much more risky now because AI is getting better and better at finding those vulnerabilities, even just in your personal life.
Yeah, my friends and family advice around that is, one, get some kind of password manager.
Yeah,
for
one
sure.
password.
Yeah, that's what I use.
Yep.
Yeah, one password. And the second one, when I first thought about this, a super encounter, it was very intuitive, but I hadn't thought of it. If you reuse a password between two services, and one of those services gets hacked, then the dark web, all the hackers have access to that, and we'll go try it on a bunch of other services and often get lucky and can get into other services.
Yes.
I just and password managers help you have unique passwords per thing, but that is probably one of the number one things that people don't do is have a unique because it's annoying unless you have a password manager to just have a unique password for every single separate thing that you use.
Yep.
So, and you don't always know something gets hacked, right? And companies don't even know half the time nowadays if they've been hacked or not. So that way, if your username and password gets out, that password's useless. It's never been used any other place.
Yep.
That's probably the number one thing. And then of course, like almost every service nowadays has that multi-factor. It'll text you, it'll whatever, which is annoying to set up. It's super important. Like that's the second. Those are the two very basic things I would say.
My very basic advice is do not give your bank account information to a Nigerian prince.
Should have thought of that.
If there's one thing. Okay. Well, cybersecurity is definitely heating up, and both for tech companies, anyone with software, anyone running a database, anyone who has sensitive information in systems, definitely need to think about that. Need to think about it on a personal level, but also AGI is not here. The
Right.
behavior of what happened is expected, and I think it
Yeah.
shows us how impressive the models are.
Yeah.
But it's not AGI. This is just sort of standard fare for things that go wrong in tech.
Yep.
All right, there you go. GPT-6 breaks out. Be careful
Yeah.
and don't
Stay
worry.
safe out there.
Don't worry about AGI. We'll catch you on the next show.